the trip and maybe just sneak in a reflection or two from my perspective. The Kenya trip was a bit of an experiment in the IS program to try this kind of experiential learning as a component of the IS curriculum. And so we went for 2 weeks. We went to Canadian Baptist Ministries as a short-term mission trip in order to look at, evaluate, critique, understand partnership model of development. So all of the students except for one had taken a course last term looking at principles and practices of effective international development. So we were doing lots of discussion and reading and thinking about international development. And then going to Kenya was an opportunity to see on the ground what international development looks like in one small kind of case study. So we're Canadian Baptist Ministry, CBM, has 2 partners in Kenya, the African Brotherhood Church and the African Christian Church and Schools. And so we spent time with both of those denominations and other things. Some of the incidental things that weren't even on the itinerary were quite powerful. From my perspective, it was a huge success. It was, of all the short-term mission trips I've been involved in, absolutely the best. I would say that anywhere, not just here. It was a great group of students to travel with. It was wonderful to go with a group who would have traveled, who could kind of just hit the ground learning and thinking right away without having to kind of deal with the initial impact. For people that haven't traveled and seen third world poverty, you know, sometimes it takes the entire 2 weeks to even come to terms with that. So with this group, it was, we were processing all the way. It was, in terms of logistics, everything went without a hitch. Tim Bannister, who you'll hear about, I'm sure, was our host and just a wonderful colleague. He's great. We did all kinds of, it was almost 24-hour-a-day learning and debriefing. From my perspective, in terms of my take on education, it was the optimal educational experience because it brings together sort of the real life living together with one another and with the people that we visited and encountered. It puts passion into learning, which for me, if there's no passion in learning, then you really haven't learned much. So for me, it was just the optimum kind of experiential learning environment. And so I think the students have a presentation. I think they're each going to take a turn talking about one or more of the things that we did while we were there. I just wanted to say, though, Tim and I drove in the vehicle with Tim most of the time. We had 2 vehicles, and for the most part, Dale went in the van, and I went with Tim in his Jeep. Partly because Dale really connects well with all kinds of people, and the driver actually requested that Dale keep riding with him. But I try not to take personally. I see it as an opportunity for me to talk a lot with Tim. And one day we were talking about that passage from James 1:27. You know, that something like true religion or pure religion is looking after orphans and widows in their distress and not being polluted by the world. And so often in conservative Christian settings, the not being polluted by the world, we often think of that in terms of, you know, avoiding all kinds of worldly things. Tim's interpretation and take on that is the not being polluted by the world is not giving in to the cynicism of the world. And when you travel places like Kenya, you could very quickly become overwhelmed with all of the need and all of the hardship and the incredible obstacles that people there deal with on a daily basis and need to overcome in order to even get their lives to a point of subsistence. And so I really like that interpretation of not giving in to the cynicism of the world. And so I think my inclination is to think that this trip allowed us to see a lot of the hardship, but also to see all of the positive things that are happening, the ingenuity of people, the resourcefulness of people to solve their own problems, but also what can happen when outside agencies come along and walk with them and work with them. So I think you'll see some of that in their presentation. And having said all that, I don't know who's starting. I have no idea from here on what's happening. So I turn it over to them.
Should we get chairs and go up?
What?
Yeah. We can just stand.
So how this chapel is going to work is that we're going to give you kind of like a general overview of what we did daily first, and then we're going to each share with you just an experience that really meant a lot to us, something that we learned, etc. And then we're going to end by singing you a song that we learned from a beautiful bunch of kids together. And do you want to And Jeff's going to pray to start us off.
Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to share experience with the school. I pray that you help us portray our thoughts clearly and articulately, and yeah, that we can bring across what we experienced to the rest of the student body and staff and community here. Thank you, Jesus. In your name, amen. Okay, so yeah, this is a slideshow of just our day-to-day experience. We traveled. We had a layover in Amsterdam, so we actually got an opportunity to see the town for a bit. So that was pretty neat.
I showed them all the red light district.
Yeah, it's interesting. In Amsterdam, I think the oldest church in Amsterdam is surrounded completely by the red light district. And that's just such an interesting thing. So one more after this one.
When we were all jet lagged, we went to an elephant orphanage just right off the bat. Right, we got off the plane at like 7:30. Went and had coffee somewhere, and then went to the elephant orphanage, which was really, really interesting, and they did awesome good work there.
All right, so we had spent 2 nights on planes, and then the whole day from 7:30 in Nairobi. So it was pretty much 3 days of not really kind of getting regular sleep. And so the next day we had a full night's sleep, and then we were off and doing our activities. And the first one we went to was Eastleigh Community Center. Eastleigh is a community in the development area, or the industry area, or something like that, in Nairobi. It's pretty big, and this community center helps immigrants and Somali refugees. So it's a holistic community center where they teach vocational training, they give education to the Somalis, and they teach them life skills, and so how to write proposals for loans and stuff like this, basic kind of stuff that we've learned through school. And here on the right is a pottery project, and they do great work, like some of the potteries over there. And so, yeah, without this kind of center, really the refugees and immigrants wouldn't be trained, and or at least not as readily through this center, so it really helps them. So that was day one. Or day two.
Okay, so then on day 3, we went out to the headquarters for ACCNS, African Christian Church and Schools, where we met a man named Henry there, who is head of development for ACCNS. And ACCNS is one of CBM's partners in Kenya. So they took us out to see some of their Guardians of Hope projects. Guardians of Hope being a project that works with HIV/AIDS. Not necessarily people who have HIV/AIDS, but people who have been affected by HIV/AIDS in one way or another. Either they've lost their family, or they've lost a primary giver in the family, or in some way they've been affected by it. And so they work by giving microcredit loans to these people to help them kind of get back on their feet after they've experienced the trauma of going through all this stuff with HIV/AIDS. So on the left you see we went to this one lady who had got a loan to start a little roadside bar, I guess you could call it, just with like drinks and yes. And it was a Coca-Cola kiosk, and so she was just selling some basic stuff there. And it sounded like it was really helping her. One of her kids was off in school, which was really good to hear, and the other little one was there with us. And then we saw a bunch of different projects where people had been given a cow And the way it worked is they would get the cow to use as for milk or whatever they needed it for. And the first calf that was born, they give back to Guardians of Hope, and then Guardians of Hope give that to another person. And so it really just like expands itself by producing more and more cows to hand out to people. So that was really cool. That was our third day.
On day 4, we went, the pictures you see here are in the bottom of the Rift Valley. And so, do you remember the name of the village? So this is, I don't know, what we saw on Thursday was pretty much like the most ideal story of development, I guess. What happened was the people living in this very rural, wasn't even really, I guess there was a Mahi Mahu village, but then there were just tons of rural kind of like families around. And so and they had to walk 11 kilometers to get the nearest source of water, which is this little spring. And so what they did was, to my best understanding, they kind of came together, formed this like intentional community to get something done about the water problem. So they made a proposal and made a plan of like making a kind of a weir at the spring to kind of collect the water and then piping it all the way down into kind of like the center of their farming community, and then building what you see here, the cement thing is the water collecting thing, and then the most I think anybody had to travel was 5 kilometers. So, but what happened was after they made this proposal, this plan, then they went and sought out funding to make it happen, which it was just so cool to just find that kind of initiative and intentionality and kind of thing. So, and then when we got there, they talked to there was the village leaders or the people in charge of this water project talked to us about it, and then they gave us these like homemade fried dough things and pops. So then we hung out with them for a while. And this woman's name to the right is Teresa, and she was lovely to talk to.
They dug the trench by hand for the piping, like 8 kilometers up, or 11
kilometers, yeah.
Up the mountain, like just digging by hand the trench.
And they did it all like together as a community. So they allotted like, my question was, how do you do this when you all have your normal chores to do, your normal work? And they said they allotted 1 day per week that they all work together. So they all like dug the trench together on this 1 day a week. It was so cool.
Okay, so day 5, we went about 2 miles away from Tim's ranch on the edge of the Saguaro Plains to meet Jim. And Jim, for like 30 years, that's not Jim. That's Jim. And Jim has like for 30 years had a passion for lions that was just amazing. And I think all of us kind of left there with broken hearts to a degree. And the guy is really at the end of his life now. He's got a lot of problems, cancer. It was really sad. But he has these 4 lions in these huge pens, basically, but he called them mountains. They're huge. And they're in great shape, and his dream is that they can be released onto the plains once a conservancy has been formed out there to protect the wildlife, because Nairobi is expanding at such a rate that all the wildlife is being driven away. All the mass migrations that have gone on for who knows how many hundreds of years are being stopped because residential areas and businesses are encroaching on the territory, and now farmers and herders are bringing their cattle into the area, and then when lions naturally attack the weakest thing that's available, they get hunted down and killed. So Jim's been seeing this happening for a long time, and he's fought and fought. Anyway, it was just an amazing story meeting him. And so that was the morning. We spent the morning with him at least 2 or 3 hours, and then in the afternoon, okay, so I guess we don't have pictures of the meeting that we had, but in the afternoon we met with some leadership from the African Brotherhood Church. They came out to the ranch, and it was just amazing. I'll talk more about that later, but we met Teresa and Ruth, who were, Ruth is part of the Canadian Baptist Ministries, kind of a liaison to ABC, and then Teresa was kind of the head of the development office with ABC. So we dealt a lot with her from that point on, really.
Oh, that's me. So on Saturday, we were supposed to have like our first day off, and I think we needed, well, I thought we needed it at that point, but instead, we woke up at 5 a.m. We went to Misaka School for the Physically Disabled, and we were just told that we were helping these kids get put on a bus. And so we went there, and we kind of got shuttled into this room, and we started singing hymns, because there was hymn books there, and it was really funny but good. And then we kind of all wandered off, and we started talking to the kids that were outside, and they were all so excited for this day. They were going to have a day of fun in Nairobi. But the buses didn't come for like 4 hours while they were waiting. And so what we did is we just got to know different groups. I think everybody had their own experience there. And we got to know just different groups of kids and their hearts, and we saw just huge amounts of joy despite this whole 4-hour wait, which would totally, anybody here would just be so upset about that. But and they taught us songs, and I fell in love with the girl. There's a picture of me there talking to a girl in a wheelchair. Her name's Naomi, and she just stole my heart. Yeah, it was really a really good day, really hard to do.
And can you go back a picture? The second boy, in the left picture, the second boy from the left, is named Daniel, and I'm going to talk about him later. That's Daniel.
Okay, so on Sunday, we got trucked out to this little church way out in the middle of nowhere. Like I thought our car was going to roll at one point because of the hill that we were driving down to get to this church. Anyways, we got welcomed in. It was an interesting experience because like behind where you see the choir people there were all the pews of everybody else. And then we were like the guests of honor. So we sat to the right and the left of that bluish purple thing that you see in front of them there in these chairs that went beside the different pastors that were speaking at the front. And the guys were on one side and the girls were on the other side. And but it was just such an amazing experience. We had the opportunity to get up and dance with them, as some of you might have seen in the videos that we were showing earlier. And I think one of my favorite parts of being there was to see how they did offering. And basically what they did is everybody who was up, like everybody gets up and goes and puts something in the offering plate at the front, and then they sit back down. And then there's like 5 more rounds of things, of offering type things, where like they'll do like a fundraiser to send somebody to school, and raising money for somebody who's getting married to help them pay for the wedding, and raising money for whatever, like all different kinds of things. And then the other thing that they do is if people can't afford to give money, they bring like mangoes, or they bring a chicken, or they bring a goat, or they something like that, and they donate that as their offering. And so then there's this whole like auction process at the end of the service where they auction off everything that has been given.
We got so many mangoes.
And so that was just really cool. I thought it, I don't know, to me it was really impactful because at first it's like a little weird that they're doing an auction in the church and selling off these goods and stuff, but at the same time you see like how these people are really giving whatever they have. Like they can't give money, so they have a farm so they can bring food, or they can bring chickens, or they can bring whatever it is, and they just kind of give the little that they have, they give it. So it was really cool.
We went and met with the African Brotherhood Church and the bishop. I'll just say what I took, because there was a lot of stuff that happened on that day. We went and visited a deaf school that was affiliated with the African. Oh no, never mind. Okay, we got our comedy this day. What?
go, there's two
Yes,
slides. This
yeah, we did.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is 8A.
Oh, so does the same day.
Yeah, we did. Got it.
When we went to that school.
But that's not the desk. Oh, it's not this day.
No.
The day that we met with the meeting, the day that we met with the African Brotherhood staff, and we got our common names. I'll talk about that because it was really, really interesting and inspiring to see the way that they worked together, and they were so knowledgeable and so welcoming. And something that Teresa had said, not that day, but the day when she'd come on the farm, was a Mother Teresa quote, which is, if you can't feed 100, feed one. And I think that really sums up the way that they work together. And there's so much need, but they focus on what they can do and not, they don't get weighted down with so much. And so I actually held on to that quote a lot during that trip, just because you see so much need, but what can you do? You can just help the person beside you, and you can have a conversation with the person in front of you. And the group of people that we met, and the women, and I guess there was a guy there too, but they were absolutely wonderful. And they gave us our common names. Maybe you guys should go down the line, because I'm lazy.
Okay, I am Gumbau. It's Kamba for warrior.
Mine is Maua, which means peaceful, or peaceful one, or brings peace or something.
My name is Wendy, which means traveler.
My name's Mumbai, which means beautiful. My name was Muteu, which means great.
Mine was Metheka, which is like smiles a lot or always.
And mine was Mueni, which means one who will return. I will say something about the water project, that one there, because the way that they work, it's part of like the microfinancing that they do, and so the overflow of water that they get, they can sell and make money. I can't remember what it was 20 shillings, I think, for
So it's
Or
like
2
2 or
shillings?
3,
yeah, so pretty affordable, and it's just so incredible to see these different water projects and these different microfinancing things that are being implemented. And when these communities come together, they get stuff done, and they don't wait, because you can't wait for a corrupt government to help you, kind of thing. And so they do it on their own, and it's very, very inspiring.
And 80 shillings is $1, so 2 shillings kind of gets it right.
That's right. So we did a ton of things on this day too, so I'll just try and go through it all really quick. Yeah. We went to the ABC sponsored school for the deaf, and they showed us a bunch of the different projects they're doing where people go through different streams, so they can do tailoring, and that's the first room there. They practice sewing on, it's just like paper, like brown paper, but they like practice sewing it into little things. And then there's an IT stream that they could go through too. Is that what it is? Oh yeah, and they do carpentry too. And then they did a presentation for us on the right side. That's them. They did this presentation with sign language about HIV/AIDS, which was really funny. And so we just kind of hung out there for a minute, got to see how that all worked out, and stopped by the ABC guest house. Then we went to this ABC church. Oh yeah, and the agricultural demonstration plot. That guy over on the right talking to us is Julius. And he showed us all about, okay, well they did so many different things here. This was a church, but there was different groups in it that did, there was a Guardians of Hope group, which is people, oh, that's the next slide? Okay. Okay, this is all tied in. Yeah, so the Guardians of Hope group, they did, they were all people sort of affected by HIV/AIDS, but they formed groups and they did microcredit and other income generating projects. They made soap to sell for profit, and they also worked on this Farming God's Way plot, the slide before, which is what Julius was showing us all about. Oh, okay. And it was this demonstration plot to show different farming techniques that they have. I'm sure this is going to come up again.
Like how they graft trees together to make like orange trees grow really well there, and so if they want limes, they take a lime tree or whatever plant that doesn't grow as well, they graft it with an orange tree, boom, they get limes. So very clever ways of gardening there.
Yeah, just like different farming techniques. This was a whole demonstration so that people from the community can come in and help work on it and learn all these techniques. And so just to kind of be a light in the community, and it also helps all those members that are in the group all work on it and benefit from it too. So it's just like this very holistic group that's working on all these different projects. So it was a lot that day. Oh, and they do silk screening too. That was Nicola doing some silk screening.
Do you know what's really cool about that seed thing though? It like regulates your blood sugar level. So we ate it, and it's this really bitter, like sweet, bitter, I don't even know how to explain it, it was disgusting. But then you drink a glass of water after and you can taste the sugar, and it's like regulating your blood sugar. So it was so fascinating. Like they know so much about so many things, and just
really good cure for
diabetes and
well, helps like regulate diabetes.
I had 5 of those seeds.
Jeff didn't get the memo.
It doesn't sit well. It doesn't sit well in your stomach.
So figured you could have more.
So day 10, we made a long journey out to a village called Kivingo. And it's so neat because Kenya has really dry, arid places, and you go and then you go through the mountains, and it's lush and green, and it's mountainous, and but there's also plains. And so really just going on that 4-hour drive to this Kivingo village, like it was restful, and it was just beautiful to see the countryside. And we arrived at Kivingo, and this was it was a church project, so. It was neat because everything was operating from the church, and it wasn't just helping us select people, but it was trying to help the community, and they provided care for the orphans. They had water projects going. Like on the left there, they have a filtering unit, and so you can buy these. Fairly cheap, and it just basically filters the water because there's in those areas there's a lot of waterborne diseases you have to be careful about. So I guess I don't know how do you know how they finance for those water projects? Was it just out of their pocket, or was it through the seedling thing?
Well, I think all of those things work together.
Okay. Yeah. So they just provided filters for the community. And then they had a seedling farm where they cropped seeds to plant so they could reforest their area, make their soil better. And also they sold seedlings to neighboring communities and to their community members. And so that generated funds. And then, what else did they have this place?
they had goats.
They raised goats, so that provided everything a goat can do. So, milk, cheese,
Quite a bit actually.
and then, but not just have it, but more goats, because, they make goats. And they had this really neat thing, like, because there's so much sun in Kenya, they could harvest that sun's energy to cook food. So they had these solar panel ovens. And so they put meat into this container, and it was a specially made kind of pot that absorbed heat really well. And then they had this solar panel you could fold up and like put in your pocket kind of thing. Well, maybe not pocket, but backpack. But just so it left space for the top was open, and then everything else reflected its energy concentrated on the pot. So in an hour, if you had meat, it would be cooked. And so that allowed them to do other things than have to be by the stove and always be by the cooker kind of thing.
And not use like
and,
wood.
And you didn't need firewood. So that's... Yeah. Or Slugman's crock pot. But yeah, so it's anyways, it was neat because, again, what Nicholas said earlier, like they were taking an initiative to do stuff, and it's amazing what they could do, you know. And just it was really encouraging to see development happen. Just like, wow, you guys have so many neat projects happening, and you're actually it's benefiting the community, and so yeah, that was pretty neat. And then I also mentioned about the orphan care they're doing there. There was in this community there was 5 churches, and there was about over 60 orphans in this area, village, and they were caring for the most desperate. So I think they were caring for about 15, and they basically had, I forget exactly how it worked, but basically there would be volunteers that would stay with the kids, or they would live with relatives, and they would help provide school fees and stuff like that. So just the lack of finances limited how much they could care for the orphans. But it was neat to see them actually taking initiative to do that.
Can I say one more thing about the daytime?
Yeah.
Oh right. So at the end, like all through the days, people were often like introduced us to like a water project or different things, and they were like, and this is because of you. And we didn't I don't think we came with Canadian Baptist Ministry (CBN), but none of us have actually, other than paying our money for like the trip. I don't think many of us / any have donated to CBN. And so it was like we got to see how grateful they are, and it was like representatives like standing in proxy of the actual donors. And this place specifically, we were eating lunch, and a lady came up, a grandma of 2 of or our guardian of 2 of the orphans. And if you see any pictures of orphans in blue and orange dresses and pants and stuff, that's them from the Kimbigo village. And she came in, and she had Ben, can you hold up one of those boards right there? And she came in, and yeah, and she, okay, cool. And she was just so emotional, and she just wanted to say thank you to the people who made it possible for her to care for those kids. And she presented us all with these like water carrying gourd things that she had made to give to us. And then also the pastor stood at the front of the church while we were, the kids had organized this song to sing to us, and then the pastor or the chairman or something stood up and just for a couple minutes just was thanking us, but more than us, the support community that sent us. And so, and I just wish that I was videotaping, because he just said it so perfectly about, it felt like he knew that like, we know that you're representatives of someone. It's not just you, And he was thanking the school and the church that sent us and all these things. So that was that day too. And this is so.
It's the last one we're doing.
Yeah.
This is the last day.
Day 11, which is Thursday. We left on the plane on Saturday. In the morning, we had been talked a little bit, kind of throughout the 2 weeks about this thing called Farming God's Way, because Tim Bannister, the man that we stayed with, who kind of traveled along with us the whole time, he said that very few things have gotten him really hoping and really inspired in all of his because he had so much experience on the mission field. But talking about farming God's way, he's just whole demeanor just lit up, and he was just it was so cool hearing about Farming God's Way from him. So he's a trainer. And Farming God's Way, in a really small nutshell, but you can look at it on the internet too, is a way of farming that actually takes into account the African landscape, climate, conditions, etc. Because how they're farming right now is they're using the traditional ways that kind of the colonizers made them use, which is the same that we use here in a completely different, like geographical conditions, completely. So, and it's all kind of based on this man named Ryan Oldry. Wow, Ryan Oldry, who was a tobacco planter and then became Christian, or his kids were like, I don't think you can do this while being Christian, or something like that. So he ended up planting corn, and then his corn completely died, and he had to, he almost went bankrupt, so he had to figure out, okay, there has to be a better way to do this. And I think he was living in Zimbabwe. Yeah. And so he was like, okay, there has to be a better way. He goes and sits in the forest for a while, and he's like, God has to have a better way for us to do this, to actually create some yield. And so he kind of looked at the forest and came up with some good things, okay, the soil always has ground cover, so because as soon as the soil in Africa, the rains come, soaks it, and then but it's so dry that Africa has a huge problem with soil erosion. And so Tim was saying that every year enough soil washes into the ocean to fill a boxcar train that wraps 3 times around the world. And much of that is, and it used to, in the rainy season, it used to take something like 3 weeks to get from, I guess, as soon as it hits the ground to the oceans, but now it takes 72 hours. Because, so it's crazy soil erosion problems. And so this Farming God's Way uses super quality, do exactly what the seed packet says pretty much. Cover the soil so the sun doesn't bake it as soon as the sun doesn't bake the soil super hard. And you don't see it right there, but we just covered it with what's called mulch. Covered it with hay and stuff. So when the sun, okay.
It holds in the moisture.
It holds in the moisture. Yeah.